Oh, Rome, I feel like we just got to know you, and now we are talking about the decline and the fall of the Roman Empire. All right. And so we are going to start this conversation with the later emperors, the people that, even more than the early people, in the early people, you really need to know Augustus and Caesar, who wasn't even an emperor, and Marcus Aurelius because of his writing. But these late people, name and what's their role, very important because they all have this particular turning point and what defines the Roman Empire. So we're going to start off our conversation looking at the later Roman emperors and what their role was. Now I have to remind you of kind of where we were before we discuss the rise of Christianity, which really has quite a bit to do with our conversation today. But I want to go back to the people. We entered a period that's called the crisis of the third century. Commodus, who was Marcus Aurelius's terrible, violent son, who plunged the Roman Empire into chaos. He is killed in the year 192. And between 192 and 284, this third century, Rome is going to have 28 separate emperors. I mean, they are coming in and disappearing at the clip of about one every 36 months. The military will come in, they'll put somebody there, and then, they'll be terrible and the military will cut them down and they'll put a new person there, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of the stability that had existed during the Pax Romana, not a lot of it, all of it, kind of just disappeared. Towns and cities, people are going to move out of them, go to the countryside. There's not enough taxes to pay for the military. So because the military is not being paid for, it's not safe to travel or trade around the empire. Money goes down in value for a variety of reasons. A couple of that we're going to talk about. They have plague. There's civil wars. It's just awful, awful. At the end of the Pax Romana is, a crisis, and the crisis lasts for almost a century. So, the Roman Empire very easily could have fallen in the third century, just, disappeared right there, but it doesn't. And why it doesn't is because of this man. This man's name is Diocletian. You have to be careful reading about Diocletian because a lot of the things that are recorded about him are kind of negative, and we'll talk about why that is in a minute. But he is a hero. I mean, if you were a Roman, this guy's a hero. He ends the third century chaos. He comes in and really fixes the economy. He fixes the military. He restores, some value to the currency. And he really ensures by himself the survival of the Roman Empire for almost the next 200 years. And he does that just with the changes he makes. So one of the problems with the money is that, as the money became tighter, you can look at our chart that we have back here or right here in front of you. And you'll see that, one of the things the emperors do is they decrease the actual, silver and gold content that's in the currency so that they can make more coins with less precious metal. Well, Diocletian reverses that. He restores the actual value, the silver and gold value to the currency of Rome. And so people believe in it more. It takes less Roman money to buy things. People aren't so busy trading chickens for bread. Instead, they are accepting Roman currency. So if he does all these things, why is some of the record on Diocletian kind of spotty? Why are people pretty negative towards him? Well, he is the last Roman emperor that's going to make a push to kind of stamp out Christianity. And Christianity, and we'll talk about this today as well, is going to cause some problems for Rome. And Diocletian, as a Roman emperor, was all about fixing Rome's problems. All right. So a lot of the times, the histories that we read about this time period, in the third century, there's Diocletian. In the fourth century, Rome is going to become a Christian empire. And so a lot of the histories that were written about Diocletian and some of the other people that come before him, even those Julio Claudians, they were written through a very religious perspective, and they were written by Christian historians. So the role that Diocletian took in, persecuting Christians at this time is going to make a lot of our record of him as an emperor very negative. And so, there's a grain of salt that comes into all those records because there's a lot of backstory that goes with what we can read about these men's time in charge. The Great Persecution, you know, it wasn't as expansive as you would think it was, but truly, thousands of people who identified as Christians and that the government identified as causing problems or instability within the Roman Empire would have been arrested and or executed for their religious beliefs and their other activities. All right. The most important thing that Diocletian does, though, and this is the thing that you need to just lock into your brain about Diocletian. He looks at the size of the Roman Empire and he realizes the size of it is one of the reasons it's struggling. So Diocletian divides. See how easy that is to remember? Diocletian divides the Roman Empire into sections that make it more easy to govern. Doesn't that remind you of the Persian Empire and the satraps? How they broke the giant Persian Empire into satrapies? Well, he divides Rome up into these 4 units. And you've got, an Eastern emperor and a Western emperor. You've got a lower emperor on both sides that are not called, emperor. They are called the Caesar. So you've got an Augustus and Caesar in the West and an Augustus and Caesar in the East. And it makes it easier to know local problems and provide the things that, local governance needs, collect taxes, secure the borders, all those types of things. Brilliant. And it doesn't necessarily work really well, but it does kind of create something in the terms of Rome too. That it's a recognition that there is a very different Eastern and Western half of the Roman Empire. One half of it is much more Roman, Latin, that's in the West, and the other half of it is much more Eastern or Greek. All right. So eventually, this division into East and West is based off of lots of different things. Culture is going to be very different. Religion is going to be very different. It's going to have different economic systems. It's going to have language differences. People in the West are going to speak Latin. People in the East are going to speak Greek. And so, I just want you to kind of concentrate on a couple of the huge divisions right now. And believe me, we will be talking more about the language and cultural and religious differences as we go forward in class. So in the West, what are we looking at? People in the West really concentrate on farming. Latin is the dominant language that academics and the church and et cetera and all that will use in the Western half. It's much more European by culture. And in the East, you are going to have, a much larger concentration on trade, which makes sense because, think of the Greek influence. The Greeks were all about trading through the Black Sea region, the Mediterranean region, and down into the Nile River Delta, etc. Greek is going to be the language of choice, and it is a much more Asian influenced culture because of the influence of ancient Mesopotamia, and then Persia, and then Greek and Hellenistic, Alexander the Great adopting all those things and pulling them into the Mediterranean world. So this is a big deal. Diocletian divides Rome based off of religious, cultural, economic, language differences. Okay. The religious differences are really coming. They're not here yet, but they're going to be here really quick. Okay. All right. So what does Diocletian do now that he's done all this stuff and he's a Roman Empire, a Roman hero? He retires. He says, look, I've fixed this problem. This is good. Rome is in good shape. And he says, he looks back to history and, like the thing that Augustus didn't do that had just plunged Rome into chaos so many times is he never planned for a succession. So Diocletian, following that model of Cincinnatus and doing things out of, tradition and really out of like patriotism for Rome, he says, look, after 20 years as an emperor, everybody's going to have to retire. That's what we're going to do. We're going to retire. So at 20 years, this guy just says, okay, I quit. I'm not emperor anymore. Everybody else has to do this too, or it's not going to work. And he leaves and he moves to Croatia. You look down here in the bottom left corner. This is his palace. It's in a place called Split, Croatia, which I think is hilarious because he splits Rome in half. That's one of the reasons he becomes a hero. And he builds this beautiful palace, and he has all the poor people that live around him come and work at his palace, and he becomes a cabbage farmer. That's what Diocletian does for the rest of his life. You know what? It ain't much, but it's honest work, and he retires. All right, so there's Diocletian. That's what he does. He sets all this up. Everything's going to last. Rome will stand for 1,000 years, except for it only takes like 15 years for somebody to say, "Nah, we're not going to do that." And that guy is going to be Constantine. All right, Constantine is going to come in after Diocletian retires, and he is going to be one of these Roman emperors, the Augustuses and Caesar, the Tetrarchy is what it's called. 4 different places, 4 different rulers that work together, etc. But another guy named Maxinius and him argue. It really becomes very much like the triumvirates that we learned about earlier in class with Caesar and with Octavian. Somebody wants to be in charge. That human ambition, and so Constantine is going to go to war over succession. All right, and he is facing defeat. Now, this is the story, and some people think this is apocryphal. And he goes back and kind of changes the story up. But he says that he's losing this fight to be the emperor of Rome. And he says he looks up in the sky and he sees a burning Christian cross. And it says, with this symbol, you will be victorious. And so he has all of his men paint the Christian cross on their shields, and they defeat the guy that he's fighting to rule the Roman Empire at a very famous battle called the Battle of the Milvian Bridge. Now, interestingly enough, at this time period, there is actually astronomical recordings of a meteor shooting across the sky. We have record of it in several different cultures, historical text. So, maybe he looked up and he saw this meteor and he says, "Oh, it's God is speaking to me." And they win this battle at the Milvian Bridge, and Constantine will emerge as the sole Roman emperor. All right, and this is huge because it is going to begin the permanent shift of Rome from the earliest origins of the Roman Empire, caught in the mythology of Romulus and Remus, twin sons of the god Mars, and all this stuff, and start moving the Roman Empire towards its later stage as the empire of Christianity. So in 313, Constantine decides he is going to legalize Christianity. Christianity had been, illegal. It is illegal because it violates the rules of Roman citizenship. So, like, part of the rule of Roman citizenship is that when you pay your taxes, part of your taxes go for the upkeep of, like, the Roman temples, like the Pantheon, et cetera, which, are, that's a temple to all gods. And so a lot of Christians refuse to pay their taxes because they don't want their money going towards the upkeep of a temple to all gods, even though even in some points at this point that, like, Jesus and God is going to be included in the worship at the Pantheon. All right. So this is called the Edict of Milan. And what it does is it says that Christianity is not illegal, period. That's all it says. Okay. But that's a big deal because it allows people who are Christians to not fear, future and further persecution like they had faced, in some parts of the 3rd century, and mostly in the 1st century. Okay, and so Christianity is elevated to having an equal status to, like worshiping, Zeus or Mithra or Mars or Jupiter or any of the other gods. All right. So in the year 325, Constantine is going to make another religious move. He is going to call a council of church leaders to make some decisions about what it is that Christians actually believe. And they're going to meet at a place called Nicaea. And so some of the things they decide is, there's a lot of arguments about, what day was Jesus crucified and rise from the dead. Everybody has different beliefs on that. So they basically just sit and go, okay, we got to pick one. And so they pick a day for Easter and they establish it. And they establish, some practices like, like, what do we believe? Do we believe, and again, if we had more time in the historical origins of Christianity, there is a huge, almost dominant belief that, Jesus and God the Father and the Holy Spirit are 3 separate beings, that exist. There's a belief that Jesus is a lesser incarnation of God. People fought over this stuff all the time. Well, the Nicene Creed establishes a set of belief that all Christian churches need to follow. This creates the Catholic Church, which is the origin of all Christian churches that exist today. And all Catholic means is this: it is the universal Church of Christ. That all churches will flow out of this original Catholic Church in 325. This is the Nicene Creed, and it says along the lines of like, as a Christian, we believe that that Jesus was born of Mary, who is a virgin, and that he ministered on earth, and that eventually he is the Son of God, both fully human and fully God, and that he would be crucified, and on the third day he would rise from the dead. But we just accept this as being part of Christianity. But you got to understand, there had been a fight about it up until Constantine comes in. Guess what? Constantine is now considered a saint in the Christian church because of this role. All right. Rome, in the meantime, in a political standpoint, is going to begin facing constant invasions. There's constant invasions coming in from Rome. And part of that is this: by rejecting some of those motions that Diocletian had put in place to stabilize Rome, Constantine had reopened some issues with securing the borders and, tax collection and all those types of things. So he's going to do something very different to counter this, but he does it to counter protecting the state of Rome or the capital of Rome more than solidifying the original borders as they existed. In the year 330, Constantine is going to move the capital of the Roman Empire to a Eastern Greek city that is called Byzantium. All right. So I want you to get your head around this. Rome, that was founded by the twin sons of the god Mars, is no longer, that's changing. The capital of Rome is no longer going to be Rome. Okay. It's going to be a Greek city called, well, it's not going to be called Byzantium anymore. It is going to be renamed Constantinople. He is going to name it after himself. How Alexander the Great of him. But, having this as the capital is going to fix a whole lot of things. If you look at this drawing of it right here, check it out. Whereas Rome, is there and it's in the countryside in the Italian peninsula, Constantinople is going to have a natural defensive position of water on three sides. It needs one wall to be able to protect it out there. Constantine does a snappy job of building some impressive walls out there. Very easy to defend. Very easy to control trade that comes from the east to the west. That matters in seaborne trade, and we already know that, both through Rome's history, but also through the history of Greece. And it's going to be built right there on that narrow strait that separates the Aegean Sea from the Black Sea. You already know where this is, okay? And we've identified it on a couple of maps, so we'll see this again. But all of a sudden, the capital of Rome is not in Rome, it is in Constantinople. So what else happens with Constantine? Well, he does all this, makes all these huge changes, legalizes Christianity, establishes the Nicene Creed, and moves the capital of Rome to the city of Constantinople, and then he dies. Okay. But on his deathbed, he decides he is also going to be a Christian. And so, right as he's on the way out, he says, oh, well, we don't, there's probably some myth to this part, but he says, I also, will, accept Christ. And so sometimes he's considered a Christian saint and perhaps the first Christian emperor of the Roman Empire. All right. So there's Constantine the Great. All right. So before his death, 337, he is there in Constantinople, and he is going to start building these churches on imperial lands, including protecting what was identified as, the tomb of Jesus, over the barrels of the martyrs of Peter and Paul, etc., etc. And he is remembered as a saint. Take a look at this big fancy church down here, because you will be investigating this right after Christmas break. This church is going to be called the Hagia Sophia, all right, which means in Greek, the Church of Holy Wisdom. All right, and so the rebuilding of this church and the beginning of kind of a split in the power center of Rome starts under Constantine. All right, so who comes after him? Well, if his step was to legalize Christianity, The next step is going to be a little more forceful. This is Theodosius. All right. In the year 380, less than 50 years after the death of Constantine the Great, Theodosius will make Christianity the official religion of Rome. The Catholic Church was now the only religious institution that is allowed to operate in the Roman Empire. All pagan faiths and practices are going to be outlawed. And so, really, the criticism that we could look at people like Tiberius and Nero and some of those early emperors and persecuting the Christians, Theodosius is going to say, hey, that looks pretty great. And he's going to start doing it to people that follow the traditional Roman faith. Now, look, when Constantine legalized Christianity, less than 10% of people that lived in the Roman Empire were Christians, and he made Christianity legal. 5 to 10% of people in the Roman Empire were Christian. When Theodosius makes Christianity the official religion of Rome, the only legal religion of Rome, maybe about 45% of Romans were Christians. That means that more than half of the people that lived in the Roman Empire are going to have their religion and their beliefs outlawed. All right. And he goes about the business of forcing his hand on this. So remember the Olympics that had been practiced for, 1,000 years, they are in honor of the god Zeus. He makes them illegal. He will take teams of horses and oxen and he will pull down Roman temples. He orders death sentences to pagans that continue to practice their faith. And he takes property that had been occupied by like temples of Saturn or religious oracles or whatever, and he gives them over to the Catholic Church for the Catholic Church to build Christian churches. So the script completely flips with Theodosius in this time period. All right. And so the Temple of the Vestal Virgins, their fires are put out. The victory altar that's located in the Roman Senate is pulled down, et cetera, et cetera. All right. And so this is a big move. All right. Because as the Roman Empire declines and fails, what is going to be left in the West to carry Roman traditions and beliefs and practices forward? It's going to be the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church takes up the mantle of Western Roman culture and Western Roman thought and Western Roman language, etc. Okay. And so what is Rome facing in these time periods going forward? Well, this barbarian invasion stuff just does not go away. There's all types of people, Vandals, Visigoths, Huns. All these people are causing problems. We will learn about them more. You probably know the English word Vandal. It is named after these Germanic people who were known to just come in and vandalize things. They just came in and destroyed everything and took what they wanted and left. All right. So the Vandals will completely sack Western Rome in 410. They'll do it again in 455. There's a group of people called the Huns. They will eventually settle in what we think of as Hungary. Doesn't that make sense, right? Coming in on the Eastern European front that press in the border, destabilizing all of Western Rome. My gosh, what is going on with Western Rome? I mean, it has been there for 1,000 years. Well, this is what's going on with it. This guy is not historically significant in any way, shape, or form, except for the position that he will hold. His dad gives him the name Romulus, okay? Augustulus. Oh, my goodness. We've named him after the first king of Rome and the first emperor of Rome, and that is significant because Romulus Augustulus will become the last Roman emperor to sit on the throne in the West. He is only 14 years old. 14 years old, and Rome is falling apart. And soon a Germanic king, a guy named Odoacer, will ride in and basically walk into the palace and say, all right, son, game's up. Pack up your stuff. You're going to have to go. And he literally does. He just packs up his stuff and he quietly disappears. And the Germanic tribes occupy the Western Roman Empire. This date is often called the fall of Rome, but I am here telling you, Rome doesn't fall. It's just turned into something different. In fact, it's turned into a couple of things that are different. All of these Germanic barbarian tribes that we keep talking about, these are groups of people that had grown up in the Roman Empire. They're completely Romanized. I mean, they had been part of this empire that had existed for hundreds and hundreds of years. So it's not like Rome is gone or what Rome created is gone. I mean, it's just changed and it's become more localized and less organized around a central state. So let's look at what comes in to play in this last 100 or 150 years that facilitates the fall of Rome by Romulus Augustulus. Okay. Let's make sure we get these dates down, right? If we accept this as the fall of Rome, from 753 BCE, with Romulus and Remus beside the Tiber River building their city on top of the Palatine Hill, till 476, where poor Romulus Augustulus will pack his bag and fade off into historical obscurity. There is the history of Western Rome. All right. So Rome falls. So, what are the main reasons of this decline from this empire that had lasted for 1,000 years? Well, cultural divisions. That's a big thing. They brought all these different people under the umbrella of the Roman Empire, and people spoke all these different languages. They had a hard time communicating. They dressed different. They looked different. They acted different. They spoke, Greek in the East and Latin in the West, et cetera, et cetera. There's all this pressure from the Huns. I mean, if you can't secure your borders and there are people encroaching on your lands, costing you money for military protection, but also taking away your tax base and your croplands and that kind of stuff, it's hard to continue to organize the state in the form of empire. This religious conflict stuff. Christianity versus the traditions of Rome. If you've got this large group of people that don't want to participate in what had made the state successful, I mean, that's going to have an impact. Fighting over religion or true religion is an impact. The fact that people begin to identify more as Christians and less as Romans, is going to have an impact on the stability of the empire, especially when Rome is being faced with endless barbarian invasions. You've got people that are no longer serving within the military out of patriotism. And so, because of that, there's a huge breakdown in military discipline. People are looking at it more as a job. They're not doing it as patriotism. They're like, hey, I'm not doing anything right now. I need some work. I'll just join the military if I can't come up with something else. They don't have the drive that the earlier Roman soldiers had. There's also a breakdown in the traditional Roman family because of these types of attitudes. Parents are bringing up their children to maybe hate these new Christian people because they tore down our beautiful temple. All right. Or to not trust the emperors because the emperors are thieves and they're taking all the silver and gold out of the coins. Or, don't worry about patriotism in Rome. That's not important. Just get for yourself, et cetera, et cetera. All these things are the same, but what's not the same is, remember Cincinnatus? People aren't being brought up to put the state above all things, and because of that, the state suffers. That devaluation of Roman currency, when people lose faith in an economy, when they lose faith in the value of money and the economy declines, well, people's loyalty to that economy will also decline. And last but not least, in fact, perhaps the most important is, after having, powerful people that ran Rome in ways that ensured its success, people like Diocletian or Augustus or Marcus Aurelius, just poor administration and weak leadership is going to lead to this fall, to people not seeing how to get past the problems that the Roman Empire is facing. All of these things together are going to combine to create the fall of Rome. There is no easy, simple answer to this. But you see that fall is still in quotes because the question is, did Rome fall? I mean, from 476 to 485 to 495 to 510, how much did the lives of people who are living in the old Roman Empire change? Mostly, probably not very much. the Catholic Church is still there, and Rome had adopted Christianity. People or priests are still speaking in Latin. They're still relying on agriculture, to make their bread and to trade. So the Germanics are still the Germanics. The people from Gaul and the Huns, but they had already been in the Roman Empire. Okay, the truth is this: while Western Rome may have fallen in 476, Constantine had moved the capital to Constantinople. We're not even talking about where the capital of the Roman Empire was. Eastern Rome, which we call the Byzantine Empire, they didn't call themselves that. We call them that. Byzantine because of Byzantium, because of the capital of Constantinople. They are going to grow wealthy from their capital in Constantinople. And Western Rome now may be taken over by Western Europeans. Okay. But Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire will last for almost another 1,000 years. Oh my gosh, there really is a second Rome. And so after Christmas, the first thing that we're going to learn about is second Rome. All right, the Byzantine Empire, and its face is a Greek Roman empire with different Orthodox Christian practices, different buildings, different emperors, different law codes. I know you can't wait. But this is the end of our look at Rome. Thank you so very much, and I will see you for our next class.